Hey everybody, this is Stamina Podcast. My name is Levi Lobo.
My name is Christian Puckett.
Eric Christo Martinez. Thank you for having me.
Of course, and today we talked about Eric's journey to becoming an artist through going to prison. We talked about the identity shift from drug dealer, prison convict to artist and his journey through that. And we talked about his conviction series and
turning convictions into convictions and the metaphors in my work.
Yeah, and metaphors, yeah. Thanks for checking it out.
All right,
Cool.
enjoy the podcast.
We were talking about my studio gallery earlier downtown. When we were preparing for our grand opening, and it's also a gallery, or it was a gallery, should I say. So we, our first exhibit, because we had an opening show, and we used to rotate different exhibits in there, and I would curate different shows to bring in. And our first opening show, we had Adan Hernandez headline the show. And Adan Hernandez is a San Antonio artist. He's collected in the Smithsonian, in the Cheech Marine collection, and a lot of different other museums as well, and collected by a lot of celebrities and even filmmakers, Taylor Hackford and a bunch of other people. He had a lot of success with painting the barrio, basically, and he was an artist there in San Antonio from, I forgot what neighborhood he was from, but he used to paint, Chicano arte, and he used to paint, images that were of the barrio and whatnot. So
What is a barrio for?
So a barrio is a neighborhood, you know what I mean? So it's like, predominantly Chicano neighborhood per se, and so he used to paint these images of, the people in his community, basically, in those stories. And a lot of people weren't painting those stories, you know what I mean? Those stories weren't being told. So he was really doing, and that's not a quick path to success as an artist, jumping in the art world, like telling those stories, and it's not a quick check either. You know what I mean? Like, people with money and influence, they don't necessarily want a picture of the audio, you know what I'm saying? So
they want like the whole
paint a
manifest
portrait of me that makes me this,
or paint a big house or some like idea of like make me seem wealthier, but like if it's the opposite, that people may not. Interesting. So let me introduce you as tell us about yourself, who you are, and like kind of what you do.
Okay, so my name's Eric Christopher Martinez, also known as Eric Christo Martinez. I shortened my middle name due to a suggestion by the painter that taught me to paint. And my story kind of goes is I grew up here in Albuquerque, New Mexico. I was just showing Levi this picture of our family here. It's pretty classic picture.
Yeah, that's a great picture
of our grandparents and our parents. And
that's so crazy.
I was getting ready today, and I saw this picture sitting there, and I look at it every day when I'm getting ready and starting my day, and it really reminds me of who I am and where I come from, and gives me that grounding and stuff, and I just love that picture because of the time period and
how what year do you think that was taken?
My guess is, I don't know, but I'm just gonna say the 70s.
Yeah, kind of looks like it.
So my dad was born in 50. He looks what?
20, 25, 30, somewhere around there.
He looks
like out of
20s.
the military, out of Vietnam.
Because he went to Vietnam in what year?
I think he was drafted in 68.
68 he was drafted, right? And he didn't stay very long, right?
Yeah, well, he didn't even get deployed. He just was trained and then left because he acted, this is a story I heard, was that he acted crazy to get out. But that's what he told me one time.
Well, because he was a
sharpshooter.
He was a sharpshooter.
That's what he said. I don't know. I don't know what's true or not.
You're still trying to get to the bottom of it.
What I'm saying is like he was like a hardcore hippie. He was against the war.
Yeah.
And so he did what he had to do to get out of that situation.
Dude,
he didn't feel right going and killing people.
Dude, respect, man. You got to do what you got to do to get out. If you don't feel like you're fucking ready for
drafted
war,
into war,
I feel like it's
I would do
bigger
the
than
same thing.
Yeah,
bigger than just this ain't for me. It's like he felt like it was bigger than that. It wasn't for America.
You don't want to just be a pawn, like for like the political elite to like use you as a little like, you know, disposable pawn to just go fight their wars when it's like, bro, I have nothing to do with whatever's going on in Vietnam.
Like I relate more with probably those people that you guys are killing than than you people that are trying to kill them.
Yeah,
you know.
Yeah. Dude, what a story, man.
So yeah, you keep going.
Much respect to your pops.
Yeah,
like
for sure.
I've obviously he's been, you know, I not knowing my dad early on, he was the only male role model I had other than our grandpa growing up. You know what I mean? So he was so important in my life in that way, and he was so involved in my life, even though he was in Denver. I remember my mom put me on a plane and sent me out there for weeks, you know, and just hanging out with him. Or when he was in town, he was the first guy who took me fishing as a kid, you know, going to, I think it was Sandia Lakes or Sletta Lakes or something.
Wow.
But first wanted to teach me to drive, you know. I mean, of course, I'm sure you remember, you know, sitting on his lap and doing that whole thing. But he took me on the hills in Denver and taught me to
stick shift,
to drive stick shift.
Oh boy.
So like, you know, he was a great, you know, male influence in my life, you know. So but you know, diving into his story a little bit, and even some of these things that like we may not have even thought twice of back then, but now we're curious, like, you know, how did this happen, or what, you know?
Yeah, how did he get out of Vietnam?
Well, even just some of the stories you told me before, like in California when you were still living out there, and telling me, you know, when you're working on your script and all that stuff. Yeah, I was like, wow, like I didn't know some of these stories. Like even just like he was a badass dude.
Dude, it sounds like,
you know, he was a badass. And then, you know, you just look at that picture and he's just like, he's a badass.
Just bobbing around, this crazy hair and stuff. Yeah. So anyway, so we're cousins.
We're cousins.
My father was your mother's brother.
Only brother.
Father of, or he had 4 sisters, and you are an artist now. Jumping back into more like your story. And
okay, so my story. Okay, I grew up here in Albuquerque, right? Got it, you know, real involved with growing up. You know, just what does a young kid get involved with in Albuquerque? You know, you can get involved with all kinds of stuff. You know, and and then growing up in that era of like, you know, the crack 90s, let's just say, and being an 80s baby, you know, I grew up with all those influences of like, you know, let's just say the streets, you know, and you know, I grew up in the Heights, you know, and but what people misconstrued of the Heights at that time is around that time, the Heights. I mean, you see it right here. This is considered the Heights, but it's the Southeast Heights. Yeah. You know, and this is like probably one of the worst neighborhoods in the city. Yeah. You know, in terms of crime and everything else. So, and I found that out real quick too, because when I moved out of, got my first apartment, it was right there on Tennessee on the other side of Central, and right by Copper. And I found out real quick it wasn't a neighborhood I liked to hang out in, but I kind of was in this neighborhood a lot, you know, because I was involved in the drug culture and whatnot, and you know, that brought me to this neighborhood quite a bit. And but I tried to stay as far away from it because I wouldn't go in this neighborhood unless I had to, because well, early on we were all over the place and we just didn't care. But at a certain point, it was like, okay, you know, when you go through there, you know, you're on your P's and Q's.
Yeah,
one, not just for, you know, potential problems with people, but also the police, you know what I mean? Because there was a lot of in that time there was a lot of harassment going on. Just if you were young and had any look about you, you were going to get harassed. I mean, it was a regular thing to get pulled over. Wow. Like I can't even remember the last time I've been pulled over. Right? It's not even a thing. Like
last time I was pulled over, I had a great conversation with a cop, and then he was like, "All right, you're good." I was like, "Great, thanks, man."
Yeah. It was as a kid, like literally, it was a magnet. Like, and there would be no reason to pull you over. It was straight harassment. Like you weren't breaking any laws, no traffic laws, anything.
They're like, your headlight's out, and you're like, no, it's not. Stuff like that.
And literally, it's like they would do felony stops sometimes where nothing was going on. They didn't get any call, but they'd come out with their guns drawn.
Just because.
And that was the first time I've ever had guns drawn on me.
Damn.
Was by the police. So, that's just gives you an idea of the culture that was going on around that.
Yeah. So they kind of just sum you up and assume you're up to no good.
Right. And especially growing up in the Heights, because, I was in the Northeast Heights as well. And, there was being in the wrong neighborhood on the opposite end of it, being, darker skin or a certain look, you're in the wrong neighborhood, you're going to get the cops called on you. And,
like being in the Heights.
Yeah.
Being Latino or Hispanic or...
So it's kind of living in between both worlds. And that's kind of the story of many Chicanos, right? You're not brown enough to be Mexican, but you're not, white enough to be, partake in the
American into the white culture
dream,
idea of privilege.
But actually, that was at that time, like I said, that was also a big identity and culture that was developing is Chicano culture. It was really, the term Chicano comes from a derogatory term. That Mexicans would call Mexican Americans Chicano because they're Chico. They were less less Mexican than them.
They're like not quite Mexican,
right? So they look at they're less Mexican. They're Chico. You know what I'm saying? And
so Mexican Americans are Chicanos, and then so Mexican. It's a I don't know.
It started off as a very derogatory term.
Gotcha.
And what did Chicanos do with it? We adopted it and flipped it. And I love that.
Yeah.
I love that. Like, to take something derogatory like that and take that power away. And to adopt it's like a whole nother level, right? But to adopt it and be like, to
redirect it, that it's badass.
Redirect it and turn a negative into positive. Like that's what my art and, my story and I try to put into my art is all about. And, we'll get deeper into the story as far as things that I did with that, but I don't want to get too off on a tangent and talk about the book, but, Chicano, it was a very derogatory term, but we, out of the 60s and the 70s, it really took a different turn and gave Mexican Americans an identity in itself. And it was different than it had roots in Mexican culture, of course. And even all this land was Mexico at one point before, the U.S. pushed into, the Guadalupe Treaty and all this territory.
The Pueblos and all that.
Yeah. But even before then, it was, Spanish territory until Mexico got their independence. You know what I mean? So these lands have been, and even before Spanish territory, it was just all native land, right? So
wow.
Just a lot of history. And if you think of it in terms of history, like those borders are only how old? You know what I mean? Like those borders didn't exist several years back. And if you look in terms like if we zoomed out in history, like hundreds of years from now, like that might be a short time period. Who knows, what borders may exist then.
Yeah.
So it's just really interesting history that you realize you're right in the middle of. So I've really as I was starting to be more drawn to art. Well, really when I went to prison, I dug into, okay, who am I? Going back to family and further than that, who am I? What am, just stripped down to the bare essentials of what you have in prison. And it's like, okay, taking inventory of who am I? What am I? And what do I have to work with here, this thing called life, you know, and what do I do from here, and making the best of it, you know, and I've really tried to turn those negatives into positives. So, you know, just even identifying as a Chicano is like sometimes more than just identity as a group or something. It's a way of thinking, you know, and it's very empowering in a way.
Yeah,
you know what I'm saying.
Yeah.
So it's and that's really what the movement was going on in the 60s and 70s, and how the whole Chicano movement, you know, really took an idea into a quest for you know, rightful place even in these lands, you know. That's why I Am Aslan, that painting, it's so powerful, because he is part of the land. He's forged out of the land.
That's the logo of Era. The logo that we use for Era, the company that helps distribute this, was painted by him originally, and it's I Am Aslan.
Aslan, yeah.
And it's the most beautiful story.
Again, another beautiful story. And I was just talking about this with a good friend of mine, Antonio Salazar. He's from San Francisco. Well, he's originally from Phoenix, but he's just published a book. His story is really a powerful story of someone who turned that negative into positive as well. Mm-hmm. And I couldn't imagine, you know, the things he went through as, you know, building from those ashes and what have you. But the name of his book is Antonio, We Know You. And that was a quote that Cesar Chavez, you know, you know, Cesar Chavez was, you know, in the Chicano movement, he was a very important figure in the Chicano movement, and fought for the farm workers and labor laws and stuff like that. So Antonio, you know, he found himself involved with Cesar Chavez at some point, and he, I guess, Cesar Chavez planted the seed, like, you should be a labor lawyer, you should be a you know, attorney for us in the movement.
Wow.
And he took that idea and ran with it, and he's very prominent attorney. I think he's retired now, but he you know, he's done a lot of big cases and a lot of successes for tribes and different stuff to restore some of those right some of those wrongs, you know what I mean?
Wow.
He's done a lot of great work and whatnot, but
so he just put a book out.
He just put a book out, you know. He's and it tells his whole story.
We Know You.
Antonio, We Know You.
Cool. And you've mentioned him before to me previously.
I think I mentioned him when I just got back, first time meeting him, and I went through LA, and we were talking. I was, you know, pumped up sharing the news, you know, because he also helped found the Mexican American Museum in San Francisco.
Wow.
And he and before I had met him, another good friend of mine who introduced me to him, Jimmy Santiago Baca, who's a local guy here from Albuquerque, well, born in Estancia, but he is, you know, he's a world-renowned writer and poet, and his story is very similar, where he went to prison early on, illiterate, couldn't read or write, and taught himself not only to read and write, but found a love and passion for words and poetry, and turned his negatives into a positive. And now, you know, he's published, I don't know how many books, he's won tons of awards.
He made a movie, right?
He made the film Blood In, Blood Out.
Blood In, Blood Out.
And you know, he's had, you know, the work he's done is pretty astonishing of what he's accomplished in his lifetime, and he's not done yet. You know, he's like his I don't know how he writes so much, because I wish I had that productivity with my art and painting. You know what I mean? It just blows my mind. But
tell us about that journey into getting into painting. Like, can you talk more about
so
what those moments were that you know, because you said you went to prison and you're sitting there in a cell looking like taking inventory and not sure what to do, I'm guessing. I mean, that would be challenging for me for sure, to be put in a cell, you know, especially like as a person who wants to be free and like in like especially in Chicano like culture, you've expressed a little bit to me about like the pride and the freedom to the land too. There was a video you sent me a while back, but either way, I would love to hear more about that journey in there.
Well, okay. So, like I said, I was getting real involved with the streets and, I was, you know, early on, I was real even reserved and shy and like, you know, in my shell. And then when I started coming out of that shell a little bit and finding, you know, strengths and this and that, like, you know, I started exploring that entrepreneurial side. So and I just exercised it to the fullest and found at that time, you know, the lane and avenue to do that, and I was actually really successful at it. And
were you making a lot of money?
I was making a lot of money. I was making more money than I've ever had in my life so far. So I gotta, you know, I'm working towards that, but obviously I'm trying to do it the right way now. And, but I found that what I was capable of, you know what I mean? And so,
how old were you at the time?
So when I got busted, I was 22.
Okay.
So me and another good friend of mine, I ended up going with him into a motel room to sell a kilo of cocaine.
How much is that?
It's a lot, you know. He you know, and long story short, I won't go into details or what have you, but we walk in to go sell a kilo of cocaine, and it was a setup.
Dang.
So, you know, before you know it, you know, we had assault rifles on us, and
oh my gosh, what was that moment like? Did your heart just start beating? Like you're like, oh shit.
Just trying to process it. Yeah. I don't know. Like,
did they just come out of like doors? It was like,
you know how they have those adjoining doors in a motel room? Oh yeah. So they came to the front door and the adjoining door at the same time.
Oh man.
And like
just trapped.
Yeah.
At that point you just like, okay.
And what do I don't want to get shot here, you know, and I did have a firearm on me, you know. I had 2 firearms on me and he had 2 firearms on him. So we could have went worse, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
But because like I said, I've experienced how like, you know, getting pulled over as a kid and stuff like that. Afterwards, you're always like that PTSD kind of kicks in and you're like, man, I could have just been shot there if I made a wrong move or something, you know?
Yeah.
And, so, you know, I had, reality set in real quick and it was like, you know, but it didn't really sink in until, you know, you're going through the process and you're like, you know, I didn't think it would be 10 years. I thought, you know, okay, you know, I didn't hurt anybody or kill anybody or, you know, it was just not a violent crime or anything. But they considered, at that time, they've changed the laws now, which actually now makes me not a violent offender, I guess. But
yeah, that's awesome.
But they consider just having a gun in relation to a drug trafficking crime a crime of violence, which makes no sense, and that's probably why they fixed it, right? But at that time, they were trying to justify saying, you know, it was there to protect the drugs, and it's a violent crime.
Dang.
You know what I mean? So I didn't qualify for certain programs or, you know, any...
It put you in a whole new category.
Well, because like they got a drug program where you can work off a year by just taking this program.
Wow.
You know, and it's just about drug education and stuff.
Dang.
But I wasn't able to get that. So with the gun excluded you and stuff like that. So in other words, it boosted up your points, made you a higher level. You know what I mean? And it
just because you had the gun.
Yeah, and it makes you look like you're like a violent offender. But
dang.
You know, so I went to the system, and you know, like I said, you know, you're in that situation. You're just like stripped down to the bare essentials, like you know, like everything, your whole world as you know, it's gone. You know, like and it's out there, you know, still going, you know, but you're not part of it, you know, and it's like.
And you had baby Eric.
Well, so when I got in trouble, Eric was 5, and Anissa and Serena were 3.
Wow.
And so you had kids.
I had kids. Yeah. So
you had them young then.
Yeah.
You were 22 at the time.
I had Eric when I was 18. When I was because I graduated high school. I all throughout high school I managed to stay on track. I mean, I think I was getting some bad grades through there a little bit, but I managed to stay on track and graduate on time and stuff. And so
you were saying because you had a weapon on you, you were considered a violent offender, and that put you in a new category when you were put into the system.
Right. And what I realized real quick, that because of that gun and them considering it violence, because if this would have been a state case, at that time, it would have been probably like 18 months or something that I would have ended up doing. Like maybe
today?
Like even then.
Okay.
If it would have been in the state.
Okay.
You know what I mean? It would have been like, I may have gotten 5 years and done half of that or something at most. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But that gun allowed them to make it federal. Wow. And at that time, I realized after the fact, because they built that federal courthouse downtown on Lomas. Mm-hmm. And what I realized is after they built that courthouse, they did a huge sweep all across Albuquerque for several years after that. And they were, I guess they were trying to fill the courthouse with, cases. So
they needed business.
they were trying to vamp up business. Exactly. And so basically, cause at the time they had a big push with for private prisons and prison industries. In the feds, you have like Unicor and all these prison industries where they got cheap labor.
Yeah, they make money off of. Yeah,
it's big business. So I think at that time they were even so, because they used to always call it back in the day Club Fed, and only like white collar crimes and like organized crime and it was it was nothing like state prison. It was like Club Fed. It was like going to I call it Camp Fluffy because I was at I worked my way eventually down to a camp, and they used to call that camp Camp Fluffy, but
because it's easy.
It's easy, yeah, and it's chill.
So
and you got a lot of amenities and stuff like that. So in the state, you're like it was very violent. It was more violent offenders.
Okay,
more.
So it's harder to go to state,
and it was, what I mean. And
even though if it went to state, you would have been locked up for less time.
Yeah. So
interesting.
At that time, they were really, because the feds previously weren't like really taking on drug cases unless it was big cases, and that changed. Like before that, whatever shift they started. Like you said, just picking up business and taking a lot of stuff that would normally go state.
So you fell into that category of something that would have been on the teeter-totter of going federal or going state.
Right.
And since they opened up the federal courthouse, they had to get more cases. So they said, let's put this to federal.
Well, I think it was just all over the country as well.
Wow.
Like, because not only were they just picking up a lot of drug cases, there was a lot of people doing time for immigration charges, and maybe like the first time they crossed or something, they'd just take them back. But if you get caught so many times or something, they'd be like, you come back over, it's going to be, and they were handing out big sentences for some of these guys. Like they're giving them like some of them close to 10 years, for
coming over the border. Jeez.
So, and then when I finally got shipped, well, that was 10 years for a crime of selling drugs. It was like I at the time I couldn't connect that with justice. You know what I mean? I was like, I even expressed it in court, and the judge got upset at me, like, because they give you have anything to say, and I'm like, well, yeah. I said, I was like, I don't understand how this is considered a crime of violence and you want to give me 10 years, but there's people who have used a gun, brandished it and or shot someone and or killed someone and get less time. So I don't understand
That's wild.
how this is justice. And she just got upset, like, don't question statutes. This is the law.
Damn.
You know, like,
what, do you know what statute
in other words,
that is?
Why do you have a chance to say something and then they don't want you to say it?
Yeah, like, so, what else could you have said in that moment?
That was what I needed to say my piece.
Yeah,
like, I was gonna, if I had a chance, I was going to say it regardless, you know?
Yeah.
But basically, she was like, that's your plea. Either you take it or we go to trial. And she got upset. She almost threw out the plea. Because,
really?
like, if I would have went to trial and lost, you know, the way they stack it is like, you know, they would have tried to max me out on the drugs, which, you know, could have been like 10, but let's say even 5. And then they max out, you know, if you take them to trial and use their resources and stuff like that, they get really upset and they throw the book at you. So,
you know,
I could have potentially got
everything.
like 20 plus, you know.
Jeez. Unless
I
you won the trial, right?
Yeah, of course. But you know,
it's like you don't want to piss off the system.
I got caught with the key of dope. Like I was going to prison. I understood that part. I was just like 10 years. Yeah, like that seems a little.
Were you angry when you first went in from there? Like
I think I was angry at like myself for not knowing the laws better and angry. I mean, I knew I was guilty, right? But I guess I was angry at the system, the way it was set up. Mm-hmm. But, you know, it was just reality. I just like, this is what it is. Like, you know, and then you go into that world and you just got to live that world. Like you got to put all that behind you, you know. Even out here, I learned real quick, like you said, I had children, I had stuff like this, and things are out of my power. Like, I don't even have control if I see them, if I talk to them. Wow. You know, or anything, you know what I mean? Like, you know, all your relationships out there, you know, friends, this or that, you just like, you have to let it all go because, you know, you're just gonna get discouraged. And, you know, there's a quote early on, you know, there's a lot of culture in prison that you start, you know, when you start doing your time, you start learning a lot of the culture. A lot of it's like to, you know, prepare yourself at the same time. And one of them was like, you know, you know, just you don't expect the worst, hope for the best. You know what I mean? Like you're not in control. Expect the worst, but just, you know, hope for the best. You know, and then but you learn you know there's jokes going around like, oh, that guy's hard timing. You know what I mean? And it's like, oh, like, you know, he hasn't accepted his fate, and he's like, you know,
he's fighting it internally,
and he's not
you can see it in somebody's face, like, because like see it
if you're not mentally strong in there, people pick up on that real quick.
Yeah,
you know what I mean. So you have to be mentally strong, or you know, it could cause you problems too. You know, people see that and they you know, not every, you know, I met a lot of amazing good people in prison. You know what I mean? But, you know, it is a different culture, you know. Wow. But definitely, that's why I'm glad I went to the feds versus the state, because, you know, in the feds, it was, you know, I met a lot of great guys, and you know, we were a lot more tight knit. You know what I mean? Like, especially all the guys from New Mexico, because like you're in the middle of world politics now in the feds. This is not like just mostly guys from New Mexico, and, you know, you got people from all over the world.
Wow.
You know, so you're right now culture clash and thrown into, you know, world culture of not just world culture, but world gang culture, you know, all this different stuff, you know. So, and when I got finally shipped to prison, because, you know, you go through all your court proceedings, everything, you know, anywhere from close to a year, you might sit in the county going through all that, you know, and by that time you're done with all that. Like, you just want to go to prison already. Just send me to prison where I can like settle down and get comfortable. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And you're like,
crazy.
That's just, you think back and you're like, wow, I was like, couldn't wait to get to prison. You know what I mean? Like, but it's just, you felt like you just wanted to go do your time already.
Does does the time start while you're in county, or does
it counts, you know? Okay.
Because that would be messed up if it didn't.
I think there's instances where they haven't, or people got out on like, fought their case from the outside or something, and then they don't count certain time or something that was in. But yeah, I think pretty much they count your time in, and especially if you're in county. Most people don't get out in the feds on bail. There is no bail in feds really, and the feds usually don't indict you until they have you. Like, it's rare
they'll pull you in.
The state will throw everything out and see what sticks, and that's why the state's because they'll you'll catch some small case or something like, what, 100 years? What are you talking about? Like, and they could throw everything to see what sticks, and it's just like that's their strategy. I don't know. It's weird the way it works, but in the feds, they'll just throw at you what they know they can stick. You know what I mean? And but their laws are very strict and harsh, so there's a lot of heavy penalties that come with it.
Wow.
So but when I finally got shipped, they shipped me down to La Tuna, and that was on the border of Texas and New Mexico in a small town called Anthony. So in one side of the prison, you were in New Mexico, and the other side of the prison, you're in Texas.
So it's actually on the border?
It's on the border.
Is that so they can...
So you're between basically Las Cruces and El Paso.
Okay. Oh, okay. Yeah.
Yeah, in a town called Anthony. And it was like a border prison in many ways. It was immigration. They used to do treaty transfers back and forth from, Americans who got busted in Mexico, and they would trade them for Mexicans, you know what I mean? And they would trade back and forth. So, there would be, so that...
Wait, they would literally just trade the prisoners?
Yeah,
bartering?
Yeah, exactly. They would be
We're trying to trade prisoners with Russia right now.
Are we?
The United States is trying to trade one of our... We're trying to Russian, get the basketball girl back by giving them a prisoner so we can get her back.
Really? I didn't know this was an event that took place. Well, this kind of thing occurred.
That prison was probably their flagship location, where they were there was a two-way highway there.
Wheeling and dealing.
Yeah.
Jeez.
And I have friends, a good friend of mine, he just graduated from UNM with his master's degree. But he was a treaty transfer that came over.
Dang.
And
from Mexico?
From Mexico.
Wow.
And he was from Albuquerque, but he got in trouble down there, did some time in a Mexican jail, and he was telling me some of the stories of Mexican jail, and that's crazy. But if you got money down there, you could live really well. It's almost like you're not even in prison at times, because
really,
those guys down there, those, the Mexicans down there that got money, the cartel guys and all those guys, they go to prison, they're not living they got their whole families could come in and live with them.
I had no clue that was true, but a friend on this last film I did, he worked for the CIA, which is crazy to think about, but he wrote a script and he gave it to me to read. And it's nuts because he talks about how he was working for the cartel, flying back and forth because he was a pilot, and he got sent to prison in Mexico. And he said it was like nothing for a lot of people. There was half of it was opened up and people could just walk in and out nothing,
It's crazy the stories you hear, of this really took place. And
I was reading it and I was like, dude, there's no way that's true, man. But hearing you talk about that, man, maybe. Anyways, so
it's wild.
Did you end up serving your full 10 years?
Yeah, so in the feds, you do the majority of your time. You do 85% unless you lose good time or something, or get some kind of
good time is
15%, but it actually doesn't even come out to 85%. The way they calculate it is not 85% of your sentence, it's 85% of what you do. But at the same time, they got a weird way of doing the math where it was supposed to be 50 something days or something, but it only came out to 48 or something. So,
and that's if you're on quote unquote good behavior, then you can get off a little early.
Well, if you don't receive write-ups and infractions and stuff and lose good time, then
you have an assumed good time in there that
assumed, but you, right.
So you're sentenced for, let's say, 10 years. you have 15% of that is good time, that if you're good in there, then you will serve
8.5, but really it comes out closer to 9 on 10.
Because of the math. Okay.
Yeah. Huh. So, so I did about 9 years. So I didn't lose a whole lot of good time when, like I said, I went to La Tuna, and that was prison in general was a culture shock, right? But
I don't know. I mean, can you paint that picture? Because I know nothing about it.
So I was in these local prisons here, like not jails. Like I started off when I first got busted, they put me in Santa Fe, and they had a federal holding there. But then they moved everyone out of there in federal holding, and so they moved everyone to either Sandoval or Estancia, and so I was in Estancia for a while, and then when we got sentenced, because me and my co-defendant, we both got the exact same time. If one of us pulled out of the plea, then the other one would plea would be thrown out. So like basically everything, like we were what you call like straight roll dogs, because like everything we had to do together, even though we didn't do our time together, but we did for a period of time. Because when we got shipped, it was weird because they put him in Sandoval and I was in Santa Fe, then Estancia, and when we finally got shipped, they shipped us the same time. Huh. And we caught the same bus. So
I bet that was crazy.
It was showing crazy, up on the bus, right? Like, after a year.
Oh my gosh.
I'm in Estancia, and I knew, okay, I'm leaving soon, but they don't tell you when, safety reasons or whatever. So next thing you know, they're pulling me out early in the morning, and I'm like, okay, it's time, we're going, here we go. And this is like adrenaline rush in itself, right?
Yeah.
What's prison going to be like, And
yeah.
So I go to holding in Estancia, and he's sitting in the holding tank.
Oh my gosh.
And I'm like, oh, we get to ride together, you know what I mean? So we're catching up and stuff like that. Man. And like, after like almost a year being in, and so, it was like great because like we were like, it was like my best friend pretty much, you know what I mean? Like we were pretty close.
Are you guys still close?
Yeah. So he so we catch the bus, and being that we were going to La Tuna, we didn't get to hop on the plane. That would have been the most comfortable ride. We had to ride a van all the way down. It wasn't even a bus, it was a van. And these vans, like you're not strapped in with a seatbelt or anything. You're thrown like almost like a paddy wagon or something. Like you're thrown in the back, and you're just and the worst part about it is you're not sitting front ways. They stack you in this way, sideways, and you're facing. So for what is it like all the way down to El Paso is like almost like 4 hours driving like that. And and they packed us in there like sardines, and even had people sitting on the floor, like totally unsafe.
Yeah,
you know what I mean. And I had another friend who he rode a bus and it got in a wreck, and he got a settlement because of it.
Whoa.
But I remember riding down there in this bus, and we're crammed in, driving sideways, and everyone's getting sick. People start throwing up. Other people are throwing up because they're smelling other people's throw up. And meanwhile, these guys are sitting on the floor and getting thrown up on. It was horrible.
Yeah,
what a horrible drive. Like,
there's no laws against that?
It's the feds. What are you going to do? They are the laws.
There has to be some accountability.
Not unless something bad happens, like a wreck. Like,
getting thrown up on.
That's what starts to make some change, right? When they realize, oh, maybe we're going a little too far here. We got to fix this.
Yeah.
And I've noticed even since now and then, they've redacted some stuff where like they fixed some of those wrongs, right? Like even with the laws, like I said, they don't even consider carrying that gun with the drugs a crime of violence
and
anymore.
So that doesn't affect you at all now, like post.
I think it does in the fact that I'm no longer considered, like my crime was is not considered violent now.
But does that affect like work or like anything now, other than the fact that it's like on your record it's different? I don't know. Like
how does it really change or help me at the end of the day?
I don't know, because you serve time that maybe you wouldn't have needed to serve. So there's no like rule, like, I mean, maybe if I was
trying to, get a job that would, the violent crime might prohibit me or something.
Yeah.
Then maybe then, but
I guess because at the time the laws were that they're enforced to that. I'm thinking like people who got caught with like, like weed, and served a bunch of time. And then now it's like, you can drive down to the corner over there and buy weed.
Just because they're supposed to fix all that, and that's why like New Mexico is real big on like trying to fix those wrongs and let those people out, or but there's still people sitting in there. Like, shouldn't that been first before they let people open up a store?
Yeah,
that should have been first. But I guess
because it's not federally, so if they're sitting in the feds because of it.
No, but I'm saying state.
Oh man,
yeah. So there's still people in state prisons because of weed violations.
I know someone that got life for weed.
No.
What happened? I mean, what's the story there?
How much weed was that? Like, dude, that's nuts.
He didn't get, someone driving it, I guess, over the border or whatever, got caught and said it was, he was delivering it for him or something. And it was just weed. But and he's an example of one, like I think they were trying to give him like 20 years or something from what I heard, but they ended up, because he took it to trial.
Whoa.
They gave him life. Him and his wife. They gave them life. And it was just weed. And they're still sitting in prison. They're fighting right now to try to get them out.
That is absolutely Dude, that makes me want to crazy.
Cry. Life.
So it's
not like 20 years, like life. Done.
Dude.
And for weed. And even if it was like, say, a whole carload of weed or something, it was a lot of weed. Like, how much weed do they got in that dispensary over there?
I know, right?
Like,
yeah,
pounds and pounds and pounds.
How is that justice?
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Money.
So it's all about money. And what I realized, so when I first went in, I was just like, really, the system was working on me. Like, I'm like, and I had to really do some, I knew how because I was selling coke and stuff like that, and never got into any of like the hard drugs like heroin and stuff like that. But coke was a party drug, but it was still affected people negatively, especially in the 90s when they started turning to crack and all that, right?
Yeah.
And I had some friends that got pretty messed up and stuff like that, and so it weighed on my conscience, you know what I mean, real heavy. And when I remember doing time, and I just like, I corrected that. Like, they call it a correctional facility. Like, the system isn't designed to correct anything, in my opinion. They do have some programming. I don't want to say that, but for the most part, it's warehousing. It's not correcting. You know what I mean? It's not rehabilitation.
So where did that
for most
correcting
people
come
like myself,
from?
I realized, how do you correct like someone like with my crime? Well, give them an opportunity. Let them be a CEO instead of a drug dealer.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So for me, that was one of my big things early on, is like, okay, I'm in this situation, taking inventory of what I do have, because I have nothing. I don't even have power over myself. I have power over my mind, but I don't have power over my body. I got to stand up for count every day and do this and do that. You know what I mean? So, taking inventory was like, okay, well, I know what strengths I do have. You know what I mean? And I realized that early on. I was like, I could change my product and do that with something else. I could, if I would have went to business school, I probably would have been, very successful.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? And I realized that. So I was like, early on, I was like,
it's hard too. You didn't have the opportunities that some other people like may have grown up with parents who went to business school, and you know what I mean? Like this, like kind of.
Well, you look at the bigger picture later, and you're like, well, it's kind of designed that way, right? Like they're not over there sweeping, the sweeping those neighborhoods where, people are going to Ivy League schools and this and that. You know what I mean? They're in the, they're in those communities.
In the barrios.
Yeah. The barrios.
Yeah, man.
So, and then, you start to look deeper into it and get educated and learn more about history and things that have taken place and whatnot. And then, so like, I realized, like, stepping back on it and like I had my own personal, corrections, should you say, and coming full circle with why I was there and stuff like that, and then really just diving on a spiritual level, right? And like, okay, God, why do you have me here?
Yeah,
you know what I mean. And so then it became deeper than that. Like, okay, it's obviously I was like, this is happening. I feel like it's happening for a reason. What is it? And why am I here? And it took me a long while to figure that out. You know what I mean? Like, at first it was just like, okay, this is what it is. How do I make the best of it? Right. So early on, I was just really studying business and like, okay, if I can study business and learn, like, say, the bookend and like the application of taking those skills into a legit business, I know I could be successful, right? And so,
how were you able to do that? Like, what programs or how were you learning how to do business?
Self-taught. Like,
in prison?
They're like,
or was that when you got out?
No programs. Like, early on, it was like a goal and a dream of mine. Like, I want to get at least my associate's degree in here. You know what I mean? In business. And
so you're
I could
able
have
to attend school?
No, they have programs at a few prisons, but if you're lucky to fall into one of those prisons or something.
Yeah.
But other than that, like, you can probably do some correspondence, but I don't know to what extent you could what you can do from there. And it was something I always wanted to explore, but I didn't like for one, it required money, it required help from the outside to set some of these things up, and I was just lucky that hey, I got a few bucks on my commissary to get through. I didn't want to put too much pressure on anyone out there, you know what I mean? Because and my mom, just, I mean, you talk about support and I was just very blessed because a lot of other people that I was with in there didn't have that. You know what I mean? So it was really like, it was really powerful to like build that relationship with her in that way. And, I know she was hurting and going through it as much as I was. You know what I mean? So it was really, it was hard, you know what I mean? But I felt blessed that I had her, you know what I mean? And, but I really just tried to make the best of it, per se. And I was just art was just kind of something I dabbled in, and, not just a pastime, but I was always interested in art, but like I had time then, right? So I just started exploring with it. And it was really kind of more so like trying to keep that open line with my kids and my family, you know what I mean?
I remember your mom would always at Christmases, she would show us the stuff you were making.
Oh, okay.
Like I think it was bracelets at first and some
the prison crafts.
Yeah,
prison crafts.
Yeah, and then the next year it was like a little painting, and the next year was like a bigger painting, and the next year, you know what I mean? Just like your growth as an artist, I was seeing in these like year segments during Christmas when I was like a kid.
I've never heard it from that angle.
Yeah, it was so interesting and just like, man,
I think it gave her a lot of pleasure to.
She was so proud of you
to share that. Oh yeah, and probably, I'm sure it was therapeutic for all of us. I think art. That's one thing. Art was not just a connection. Art was. Art's powerful in general. Like, if you look at history, that gives us a glimpse into the history, because we're not going to get the whole picture, or maybe the right picture from even history books. You know, I mean, history books have been destroyed over history, you know, but art seems to stay intact and carry on through generations and different periods of time, and gives us a glimpse at those old worlds, right? But so art is very powerful, and you know, that's why like now I really I believe art is huge and could be powerful for many different reasons and causes, because it can be even if someone isn't, for say, identify as an artist, right? Even just partaking as a viewer, it can help open your perceptions, you know, like it can do so many different things. But for me early on, it provided a connection with the outside world, you know, and kept, you know, so like all those drawings I would send home to Eric or the girls, you know what I mean, was like, that was a connection, right? Because I could write them a letter, but, you know, is their mom going to read it to them? You know, are they, you know, are they going to, so with the artwork, it was something visual that they can connect with a lot easier with, I think.
Can I ask about this piece of art you have right here?
Yeah. So, like I said, early on, it started off with prison crafts and just developed, and then it kind of developed into this, which is,
can you hold it so the camera, the camera's like right at your knees.
So the title of this one is, Unlocking the Master. Okay. And it's very minimalistic, right? Compared to a lot of my other paintings, but it says just as much or more than many of my other paintings.
Definitely.
So early on, like I said, I just really started, you know, getting into typical prison art, per se. And when I ended up getting shipped from La Tuna, you know, due to a riot, it was kind of like unexpected, kind of like, you know, I was really kind of the unknown of, okay, I don't know where I'm going to get shipped to, and I'm going to possibly get shipped even further from home, you know, because once in a while, you know, I would get, not very often, but I had seen the kids several times, you know, and it was kind of hard, but I'd get visits every once in a great while down in La Tuna. But like if I got shipped far, like that's, I don't know if I would, you know.
So and this was when you were going to move to federal prison, that you spent a year, and then this is that moment when you're going to go from...
Well, I'm saying from being 4 hours away in like El Paso versus going across the country or something.
Yeah, so you didn't know at that time.
Yeah.
Where?
No, so like, okay, so when I was in La Tuna, I was there for a period of time. Probably 4 years or so.
Jeez.
And got real, you know, like I said, I was in typical prison arts and stuff like that, but didn't really develop into like, you know, I was still really focused on business, you know what I mean? And at least that's what I felt like I had a future in, you know what I'm saying, as far as doing, because I knew like it was going to be a challenge getting out as a felon. I you know, I don't want to just go be at the how someone hiring a felon. Like I got to figure out a way to make sure that I'm okay, or you know, be successful, you know.
Yeah.
And so like I said, some being involved in that prison life and whatnot, you know, I mean, you never know what's going to happen, and you're just stuck in that world, and you have to live that world, right? You kind of almost have to let go of the free world, because there's things you're not in control of, you know. So being in that world, and like I said, it was a border prison, and there was so much politics going on and stuff like that, and a lot of I mean, there was just a lot of turmoil on that prison yard. You know what I mean? A lot of history of, you know, different groups and altercations and different stuff. And so long story short, New Mexico, the group, I was involved with, ended up getting a riot. We got an altercation with another group, and one of the guys from New Mexico, he got into a fight with another guy, and the guy had, he was trying to avoid the fight, you know what I mean? But the guy kept pushing it, and in prison it's a very high respect thing. So like you carry yourself with a very high respect, because if not, you're gonna have problems, because it's very, you would think it's like would be kind of Wild West, and it's complete opposite. It's more structured in there than it is out here.
Wow.
You know what I mean? Like you walk that straight line, or else you're gonna have problems.
There's like a hierarchy in there.
Well, I wouldn't say a hierarchy. It's just more like to avoid bigger problems, like a riot including like two groups. Mm-hmm. If one person was in the wrong on something, it would get dealt with like by their own people to avoid a bigger altercation.
Okay.
You know what I'm saying? So you wouldn't just like, for say, get in a fight in there. You know what I'm saying? If you had an issue, you usually take it to people and be like, hey, I have this problem, like, unless like they, attacked you or something, you defend yourself or whatever. But then at that point,
that attack would probably, somebody from the group that attacked would have to talk with the person that attacked, I'm guessing.
Yeah, it would be a whole thing, and it'd get worked out by, well, I guess you could say like the hierarchy, right? But it wasn't, it was just more so like order, right? You had someone, even if like there was gangs in there where they were very structured, and it was like probably they had their own structure like that, right? But then there was like New Mexico, we weren't a gang or anything. We just looked out for each other.
Yeah, yeah.
You know what I mean? So, we would have maybe someone, we would all talk about things or whatever, but, no one made a decision on their own. Usually it was like we figured it out, and there was a voice, someone holding keys who would voice that. You know what I mean? Or someone that had done enough time, knew enough that like, they would, try to...
holding keys.
Holding keys is term kind of like for, well, when you say holding keys, it's like, say...
like a front man or something?
Well, that voice, per se.
So somebody to speak to the other key holders and the other groups of people, that there is a discrepancy within.
Order. Right.
Wow.
And so
they're like a peacemaker in a way.
They are.
A keeper of order.
Yeah.
Or if your hang is tired, you can put your painting down.
Sorry. Yeah, I'll bring it back up when we get to this. But it's like, it's just a way to keep order in the prison and some kind of, general, kind of rules and,
does it change the key holder? Does that ever shift?
Yeah, of course, because, people get out and it gets, so like, it'll be passed on to someone who, thinks that they can, that they're capable of that understand, the rules real well, and they can, they got a good head on their shoulders. They don't think out of like, make decisions off of emotions and everything else, and
so that key holder just emerges, like it
kind of, like I kind of got pulled into one of those, to that role at a period, because it was just like in that particular unit, there was there was several guys, but like they were they thought I was the most logical choice, so I was like, well, looking around, I was like, okay, I could see that, I'll but it was more so, it wasn't like, it was just more so like, just, we were all, it wasn't a gang thing. It was like, we were just,
it's a responsibility.
Well, we were just, surviving in there. And it was like, we looked out for one another. So like, if, it just kind of created you kind of have to find your place when you're in prison too. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Kind of find out where you, and it's kind of a crazy thing, because it's like, it does create all these boundaries within there and stuff like that. But it's just, it is what it is. Like, you go in there and that's what it is. You can't change anything. You just figure out how you
work with the people around you. Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So, it just really became a thing where, like, there's always so much going on, and like, I was so wrapped up in that I couldn't even really focus on, I mean, I was reading books and doing all this stuff, but I was really preoccupied where it wasn't really focusing on me as much as I should have.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? Even though I was, but not like to the level I was able to when I got shipped, and so when we got in a riot, and it kicked off, and it was there was like about 20 of us from New Mexico that got an altercation with about 500.
Whoa.
Yeah. And so, like I said, a friend of mine, he'd rest in peace, he passed away. He in the halfway house, he had caught what was it, staph infection, and then they didn't get him to the doctor in time or something like that, and he passed away.
Wow. Recently?
So, no, this was right before I got out. He was more short time than I was, but yeah. So he all of us felt like he did what any one of us would have done. Like, he was just protecting himself, and he wasn't looking for the altercation. He wasn't pushing the issue, and there's certain and the guy was calling him names out of pocket that, like I said, you carry a very high respect level. So if someone talks to you in those words out of pocket, like, they always say those 3 words, punk, bitch, pussy, you don't use those words with another man in there, because those are fighting words, so this guy from this other group, obviously they had a different culture of doing time.
Okay.
And that's where a lot of the altercations came to, because it was culture clashes,
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And
like misunderstandings more than like.
Yeah, but it was also like, and we're the majority, we're the number, and we're going to do what we want anyways, you know what I mean? So, but at the same time, like we weren't going to bend to our values, just deal with it how we, and so, it became an issue because, and it was a dead issue because whatever happened, they got in their fight, and it didn't blow out into a bigger thing until after the fact that they wanted him to be disciplined in a different way. And we weren't going to do that. You know what I mean? That's not what we do anyways. You know what I mean? Like, we were just like, he's doing his time. Like, you know what I'm saying? We're not a gang. We're not going to discipline him in that way. And he's not in the wrong to do that. You know what I mean? So they ended up, well, like, if you don't, we will, and this and that. So, and we weren't going to just let him get jumped. So over principle, we fought a losing battle. You know what I mean? Wow. And but it was, we felt at the time it was the right thing to do, because sometimes you just got to stand your ground regardless.
Yeah.
So long story short, we ended up in the hole for 6 months, and ended up and that's where my art really took a turn, because before that I was really starting to take art a little bit more seriously, because I was studying a portrait book. And it was like some formal education. The first time I got my hands on, like, some formal, material, and it was teaching you, some things.
Are those books passed from like person to person, from family members shipping them, or is there a library? Or
there's a library, and you may, but usually, these are books that their family sent them or something. And I can't remember where I got this book, if it was passed down to me, and people get out of prison, so they pass on, and then they're passed on and whatnot. But I can't remember where I got the book, but I started studying this portrait book, and it was the first time I drew a portrait, and you graphed it all out, right? So I drew it freehand, with the aid of a graph, and I used a picture of me and Eric in the visiting room. So it was a picture of me and him, you know. So I drew this portrait and I graphed it all out, and it was like the first time I really painted something or drew something realistically, right? And I was like, wow, this is like, I was really like, I could do this. I could draw realistically. You know what I mean? And I was really like, even to this day, the way I remember it, it was like a really great portrait. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And I'd put it up to like my work now, you know, or at my prime, you know. And I was just like, wow, you know. So I was really proud of this portrait, and you know, I'd sit there and you know, sit in the unit and I'd draw it, and you know. But when we got in this big altercation, when I got my property back, it wasn't there. I was like, what would someone do like a normal drawing, you know, with no one's family member on it or something, you know? Yeah, that can, you know, someone else could appreciate it, or
there should have been a more respect, since it was your son and you in the paint or in the portrait, to give it back.
And then what would someone do with that, right? There'd be no use.
They'll sell it now and make a lot of money.
Well, and I don't know what happened to it. I feel like, did it just get lost in the shuffle or thrown out, or did this other group get a hold of it and use it as target practice, or what happened? I have no idea. You know what I mean? So, but it was like, this portrait was like affirmation that, whoa, I can draw realistically, and it really, you know, sparked my interest on like doing more art. You know what I mean? So when I was in the hole, you know, we're in this small room, smaller than this, you know, like probably close to half of this size, and you know, and La Tuna was the one place that they had 3 stacks. You know, you had bunks stacked 3 high.
Oh wow!
And they call it solitary confinement, right? They're supposed to be 1.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? But in a lot of segregated housing units, they have, you know, the 2 bunks. But La Tuna was so overcrowded, being a border prison, that they had 3 stacks even in the units and in the hole.
Jeez.
So you're in this small hole, this small room, and you're doing 6 months. You're in there with 2 other people in this small room. So, but you know, I really started drawing, and I finished a baño in there, and I did some other stuff. But I just spent so much time drawing and really, you know, wanting to pursue art more, you know. And then so when I got shipped, I go to Loretto, Pennsylvania, and complete culture shock, right? Now I'm introduced like to the East Coast, and you know, people from the East Coast. It was cool, man. I enjoyed it. Like I was like, because I was worried, like, okay, where am I gonna go and be far from home, and you know, other than being far from home and just being bummed out that, you know, I probably won't be seeing my kids anytime soon and stuff, you know. Yeah. But I was like, when I walked in the yard and I saw what a prison should look like, because like, you know, the La Tuna was not. I look back and it was you know, it was not a good place.
Yeah.
And you know, so you know, I go out there and there's trees on the yard, and there's just all these, you know, facilities and programming and stuff going on, right? And so you know, I go and I see, oh, they got a nice weight pile. They actually got free weights, and you know, a lot of the weights are still intact, because like they were taking them all out in different institutions. Like if any reason they'd have, like they'd take something away. You know what I mean?
That's
and
so
little
crazy,
by little,
like,
they would just
philosophy.
take more and more away.
Like punish people, punish for change.
Punish
is
the
just
whole.
like, yeah.
And for, you know what I mean? So so I go over there and I'm like, the first thing I really wanted to see was the hobby shop, because I was really interested in art, right? So let's go see what the hobby shop's about. So I walk in there, and you know, given I was into prison art at this time, like baños and like, you know, your typical prisoner Chicano art that you know what I mean, or what have you. And I walk in and here's this world-class art being created right there. And I see this guy painting a painting, and then he has all these paintings that he's done or working on. And then there's other people in there painting, but his stuff is just like, I was blown away. And I'm like, he was a Dominican guy, and I didn't introduce myself or anything or at that point, but I was just like, right then I knew I wanted to be a painter. I was like, I want to do that.
Yeah.
I want to take my art to that level. And it opened a whole new world of fine art. You know what I mean? Like, and so I was like, you know, took me beyond like, you know, your typical prison crafts and art, you know, and I was just like, this is the real deal. You know what I mean? And I want to do that, you know?
Yeah.
This was another prisoner that inspired you?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. And he's still one of my favorite painters to date. Like, he's a very talented artist.
I want to see his stuff.
Yeah. He's very, I won't share his name on here just because his culture in his country is a lot different. And, you know, there's a big taboo on people in prison and stuff like that. So he didn't want any of that associated with him and his work. Where as I started developing my painting skills and my you know, developing as an artist, well, it took me almost a year to get an easel because you know, you get there, all these people in this hobby shop, you know, there's a line to get one of those easels because there's only so many easels in the hobby shop. So part of it is you had to take this class, and then once an easel opened up, you know, you can get an easel, and then you could have that easel as long as you were there or got shipped out, or if you got, you know, in some serious trouble and you lost your spot or something and you were in the hole for a long period of time or something. But it took almost a year. So I was inspired, and I would go down there on a regular basis and just view what he was doing, and it would just blow me away. Right. But I would go back and I would create art, you know, at the table and like what I could do from the unit. And was tattooing real heavy at that time too, you know, cause, you know, making a little side hustle and making some money.
So in there, you can tattoo and like set up a little rig.
You're not supposed
like
to,
with the toothbrush and stuff.
Yeah, you make a homemade machine.
That's cool.
You make your own ink, you know. And I picked that up previously, but I didn't take it seriously or really. You know, people were just more like, just do it, like, because they would see me drawing, you know, and not doing. They're like, yeah, just use me as a guinea pig. I don't care, just, you know. And I'm like, no, I'm not.
How do you make your own tattoo ink?
Different ways. Yeah, like basically you just create carbon soot. So like you can create a candle of some sort, you know, say you use Vaseline, right? And you put a wick in it, and then you make a candle and it burns, but then you put like a trash can or paper bag over it, and all that soot collects like a layer, and then you scrape all that soot off, get all the powder, and then you make an ink out of it.
Interesting.
So you mix it with water then after that?
Water. Some people would mix it with water and a little bit of shampoo, or different people would have different mixes, right? But I found like, you know, just water, but the key was like really breaking down the soot. So I'd put it like in a bag, in a little baggie, and I'd just like knead it and break it down and make sure it like mixes really good.
Thin it out really well.
Yeah, just really break down those powder compounds, you know what I mean? And make
so
an ink,
crazy,
you know?
man.
So that's what I love about prison art is it's all about the ingenuity, right?
Yeah.
It's making beauty out of limited resources.
Resource utilization.
And then you take a toothbrush, like an electric toothbrush, and then you would
or some other base to create like a frame, and then you hook a rotary motor to it that you know, a lot of times, you know, certain prisons, they'd have stuff on commissary where you can pull a rotary motor out of, like a tape player, CD player they used to have at points in time, or the beard trimmers, you know, you could pull the rotary motor out of that. Or sometimes like some prisons, they were onto it and they wouldn't sell any of those things anymore, right? But there would be people who came with them from other prisons. Or they had one snuck in somehow or something, you know. So, but yeah, so you know, the whole it's that folk art, prison art that's like just born out of those that, you know, circumstance and ingenuity, and that's the same thing with the string work that you were seeing. Like all that was thread sourced from socks and boxers, you know, and you know, we used to always, like, when guys would come in from, you know, first catch their case in the county, and they'd come in, and if they had like dress socks on or something, or certain colored socks, you know, the guys that did string work would be all over it right away and be like, hey, let me buy those from you, you know, I'll give you
that. But, you know, like, that breaks down business just in general too, thinking of that,
simple, like, economics, right?
Yeah, you look at something that somebody has that's a resource, and you break it down to its fundamental parts, and then you can redesign it, or, like, with alchemy, repurpose it to something more valuable than what it was previously. Like taking, like, the sock that's interesting colored, mixing that into a bracelet or something that now has more value because it has intellectual property in it, you know?
Basically unraveling this used material in this sock into a string, you know, so you pull all this string out.
Wow.
And then you spin it. You know, you'd use, like, say, like, you know how some, like, toothpaste caps or some, like, it's got a round cap on one end but kind of flat on the top. You know what I mean? So you'd use that round end and then create a little hook on the opposite end, and then you'd, like, roll, because it was round, so you'd, like, roll it and you'd spin it like that, and it would spin the string. So you tie it to one end, like tie it to the end of that table, and then put this end on the round part, and you just roll it like that, and it would spin the string.
Wow.
And then you'd spin it one way, and then you'd flip it and double it up and spin it the opposite way, so that way the string would spin this way, but then it would spin the other way. And that's really how a lot of, you know, certain strings are
yeah.
So, like, you know, it was really being super resourceful with what you had, you know. And that's really the beauty of prison art. Like, I feel like, you know, that's why, like, I really started collecting prison art as well, because I just love that medium. And, you know, because of what it is and what it stands for, and what, you know, how it's created out of, like, necessity and out of limited resources,
and out of perseverance too.
Exactly.
Like,
so so
you're in the hobby shop.
So I went from that to, you know, typical prison arts like baños and tattoos, you know, also being very resourceful, to fine art. And here, what was the chances that I would run into? I mean, this guy's, like, you don't run into that every day in prison. Like, every prison has some great artists, right? And you're like, oh, you know, either they're tattooers, or even if they're, like, do artwork, or, you know, many prisons didn't have paint programs.
Wow.
You know, but, you know, you get colored pencils and pastels or whatever. But some did, and even when they did, like, you didn't have artists on that caliber. Like, you had artists that were, like, became very good artists, but this guy had formal training from the outside, and he was from New York. So he was right in the middle of all that. And I don't know what history he had as far as, like, his career with art before that. But he had been in 20 years when I got there.
Dang.
And perfecting his craft, and he had formal knowledge from before.
So he seemed to be somebody who was trained formally,
right?
Got locked up for 20 years, and then just refined it.
Wow. And, like, the amount of work he would produce was amazing, and just the quality. They called him the chameleon because he was so well versed in many different styles. Like, he not just refined painting, but refined so many styles and genres of painting, like from portraiture to non-representational abstract, cubism, surrealism, you name it. Like, he's tried it all, and he's done it all gracefully. Like, and you know, I used to see how he would dive in a style, and, like, it's like he would so gracefully just put his, you know, with one painting, put his stamp and twist on that style.
Wow.
You know, and it was just, like, so inspiring, and, like, you know, like.
So you spent a year just watching him?
Watching him from afar, right?
And then what was it like when I
actually got an easel? I got in the class. I took the class. He didn't teach it. It was a different guy teaching it. I got my spot, right? I made my order, and I remember the first time my order came in, right? So I got my spot. I had my locker. So I was down there, and I was putting my stuff in the locker. and he broke the ice and he came and talked to me, and he used to do that with anyone coming in, I'm sure, because he would teach them if they wanted to learn,
Yeah, he's the master.
He was the maestro. And everyone called him maestro. You know what I mean? But he broke that conversation. I had bought some canvases, and they were already pre-made canvases, stretched and stuff. And he's like, can I check those out? And I'm like, yeah. And I don't know if it was just to break the ice or he was really interested in one of these canvases, but he's like, oh yeah. He's like, I'll trade you this canvas for a couple others. I'll give you a couple of them, but I'll show you how to make them. And I think he was just using it to teach me how to stretch my own canvas.
Okay,
that's cool.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
That's how cool he was. And he was. I was like, oh yeah, no brainer. I was just waiting for an opportunity to like show me something. You know what I mean? Like,
what a blessing!
And right out the gate, he's like, you're in my realm now. You know what I mean? And open the door,
Wow.
And so from that point on, we became very good friends, and I just soaked in everything I could from him. And I noticed I was like really picking it up, like some of the other guys, they were learning a lot, but I was taking this seriously, and I just really was picking it up. And I got to a certain point where he was like, he used to have a lot of commissions because he was sending stuff out in a gallery, and he had an art rep on the outside, but he would sign a different name. So that way, it wouldn't come back.
Yeah.
And so he had this other identity as an artist where he was selling stuff to the gallery. But yet he had commissions coming in from the inside, because all these guys, they want, hey, paint a portrait of my family member or whatever, So he was getting people buying paintings from him in there, and he couldn't keep up with that, So he felt I was getting good, where he was like, "You're getting good." He's like, "I need you to help me with these portraits." And he's like,
a backlog.
Yeah, he's like, and he's like, "You'll learn a lot because I'm gonna work over you and fix anything." And so he would do that. And beyond that, once I started doing paintings and stuff like that, he would like, if I was stuck, or he would really hands-on with helping me, you know what I mean? Teaching me. But it got to the point where after these first couple portraits I did, the first couple, like he would kind of, go over a few little things, but for the most part, he wasn't really like, I had already learned so much from him at that point. And, I remember there was a point where he was like, I'm not going to even touch the thing. Just sign it. You know what I mean? And he's all, and you sign it. I'm going to tell them that so.
Really?
And so it was.
At some point you just started like exceeding what he expected. And then all of a sudden it's like.
Well, then he came to me one day and he was like, because I was signing my first paintings, Eric Martinez.
Mm-hmm.
And he was so he came to me one day, he's like, you really got a future here if you continue painting. He's like, you're really good. And he's like, but we need to find something else for you to sign, because Eric Martinez is too common of a name. You'll never be able to like really market yourself the way you could, like with that. You need to find some. So he's like, what's your middle name? So I said Christopher. So he got a paper there, and I remember him writing Christo and then Christoph, and and he goes right back. No, he's all San Cristo. He's all, there's another artist by the name of Christo Jean-Claude, but he doesn't paint. He does like installations, and a very famous artist that does like he did the Silk Gates or something like that in New York, and he's done a bunch of big, but he's a total different artist, right?
Yeah.
But he was like that. There's no, he's the only other one signing Christo, and he spells it differently. He's all, he suggests I spell it like my name with an H, and at first I was like a little torn, like, let me, I had to feel organic and natural, right? So it took, and it wasn't until he left that I signed it.
Wow.
And he used to always tell me, paint a self-portrait. I'm like, that's weird. Why am I going to paint a self-portrait? Like, he's like, no, for real. He's like, it'll it'll do something for you as an artist. Like you being the subject and the artist, you know, you're painting this, you as the subject, it'll do something. It'll help you grow as an artist. And I'm like, okay, you know, but it wasn't until he left and I'm like, okay, he's not over my shoulder anymore. This is sink or swim. You know, I don't have any, is this good? You know, or, you know, it's, you know, anything like that. So I was like, what am I going to paint? He said to paint a self-portrait. So that was my first self-portrait once he left.
Wow.
And then, you know, when I signed it or when I was creating it, I had this concept of, okay, if I'm going to paint me, I'm going to paint me as this new identity as an artist, you know? So I had this picture that I took in the hobby shop of me holding paintbrushes in front of an easel. And I was standing in front of a painting Tonali, the one, I don't know if, well, I won't get into that, but basically I was at this picture of me holding brushes and standing in front of an easel. So I used that as reference to paint this painting. And it gave me the idea, oh, how cool would it be to have a painting within a painting? So on that easel, I'm going to turn that into a painting too. You know what I mean? So, and I didn't know what I was going to put in it, right? I was just, okay, do I go abstract? So, you know, it's a painting within a painting, or like really distinguish the difference? Because the rest of it is really realistic. And I'm just like, and so I'm trying to figure out what I'm going to put in this painting. And I just remember looking through a book from, you know, The Passion of Christ by Mel Gibson. And there was this image of Christ in chains, and he was in chains, and that image just struck me. You know what I mean? Because like, wow, he was in prison as well, and just relating to that. But obviously, you know, I was in prison for selling drugs. You know what I mean? He was in prison for, you know, other reasons, obviously. So, but it was just very powerful to me, and I was like, so it found its way in the painting, and I put that in the painting, and so I referenced the Passion of Christ, right? But when I put that, you know, I had this image, and it was me with my hair down when I was, and people kept saying, "You look like the Chicano Christ," and I'm like, so like, it was like. And at a point I was like, well, I don't know if I should, you know, that was another reason why I wasn't sure if I should sign. I didn't want to, you know, I didn't want to feel like, you know, I didn't.
You didn't want to claim divinity.
Well, yeah, that's not what I was trying to do in any way. I just like, but then you're supposed to, you know, be in his image, right? So I'm like, whoa, okay, maybe. But then when I painted that painting, and it was like, wow, the painting was so powerful, and like one of my best paintings to date. And it was confirmation that, you know, and I titled the painting The Passion of Christo, because it was like me as an artist, the passion of this artist, right? Yeah. And his story is like obviously prison. So you got the prison in the background and stuff like that. And so I was like, not only is it the title, it was the first time I signed, and it felt right. You know what I mean? I was like, okay, it needs to. And I, at first, that one I signed Eric Christo. I didn't just sign Christo. Like, it took me a little bit of time to like really just like, okay, you just signed Christo, and all the paintings after that were. But I think the first couple were Eric Christo or Eric Christo Martinez.
I think the one in my house in the mountains is Eric Martinez. Christo.
Oh, was it Eric Christo?
I think it might be Eric Christo Martinez.
Okay, so that one might have been. Yeah, okay. So that was one of the early ones just after starting to sign Christo.
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah. And so, you know, it's almost like it was, you know, confirmation that I should paint that. And
yeah, like you've emerged into this new artist versus like the identity of self, like the reflection and the emergence of some. Yeah.
And I wanted Christ reflected in my work anyways, you know, because even if it wasn't subject in the painting, like that was, you know, my own, you know, belief system. Yeah. So it was going to be embedded in my work either way, I felt, you know, so it was like a real confirmation that Christianing per se, that this is who I am as an artist, you know. Wow. And so early on, a lot of my paintings were really expressing, you know, like I said, I was really getting into like who I am, this and that, all these things. So a lot of my early paintings were really about, you know, like the culture and, you know, like you said, of the things that were like close to me.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Whether it was portraits of the family, my kids, what have you, or like Tonali was one that was done about the culture and stuff like that. And so, you know, in the beginning I was like, okay, I want to create this Chicano series, right? I had this idea, okay, I'm going to create a Chicano series, right? But so much of those, even some of those paintings were coming out with my experience and what I was going through. And they were all created in prison. So they were all prison art anyways, right?
Yeah.
So I was realizing,
how interesting,
you know, and then talking with him, he was like, didn't want anything to do with that associated with his career, where I felt different. Like so much of it was in my work, and a lot of my history with prison art and paños, it's in the art. You know what I mean?
As do you ever feel like now being out, do you feel it's a challenge to move away from that identity? Do you want to move away from that identity?
Well, I don't feel like I have yet, but that's okay. So because I have a period, I titled it the khaki period. Like Picasso had his blue period. I had the khaki period, and I named it the khaki period because khaki is, you know, it's the prison garb that they give you. Your uniforms are khaki, and khaki's embedded even in, you know, street culture, Chicano culture, wearing dickies and stuff like that.
Culture too, with like the cutoff,
the
low pants,
like dickies and white tees. You know what I'm saying? Was real big in that culture. So it's embedded in not just the Chicano culture but also prison culture. So I was like, khaki period is perfect, right? And so much of my paintings were already starting to either have that influence in there, and I just ran with that, right? So much of later I incorporated it, you know, and as far as actually using the color khaki in the painting.
Is that khaki color?
This is khaki color, but this is actually not by, you know, going on to, he felt like he had to separate himself from that. I felt differently. You know, I felt like, oh, maybe I'm the one that's supposed to tell these stories in a fine art form. You know what I mean? Because he's not going to do it, and I don't know anyone else in prison that is painting in that way.
Yeah,
because
at that high of a level, and
and I hate to use those terms, so I say like in terms of that medium, like most people are doing paños and stuff, but this is like something that's digestible to the high art world, right? So like museums, galleries, all that, like if you put it in this format, they'll understand it better, right? It's digestible to them.
It's a language you're communicating and you're translating.
There, that's a perfect way to put it. I'm translating for the fine art world these stories, right?
Wow.
And I felt that duty. I'm like, oh, that's what I'm supposed to do. So I realized I need to create this body of work. So like I had a purpose at that point, like beyond just becoming a better artist, or I'm going to make an art career or something.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? It was like, no, I got to paint, you know what I mean? These
your
stories.
Cross you have to bear,
right. And so I took that on at that point, and I created a series called the Conviction series. And so I chose the Conviction series because, like, you know, convictions is what took me there, right? But I used metaphor a lot of my work, you know, just wordplay and poetry and all that. I was always real into that. And early on studying business, I used to always love to write. And I used to vocalize and write about a lot of my paintings and stuff. So metaphor found its way in my work. Even in the subject matter, I'd use metaphor, right? Like this one's a perfect example. It's a master lock, but when you say unlocking the master, what do you think? Like that's a metaphor, right?
Yeah.
Unlocking the master artist, you know, to be able to draw hyper realistically like this.
Yeah.
So that's what this painting was unlocking the master artist in there, maestro, right? Yeah. And the gifts that he shared with me of like that formal education to be able to paint like that. But also a simple subject to say a lot, you know what I mean? And that's becoming a master of art on a whole nother level, right? Beyond just the technical ability of how you express it and vocalize that, right? So this was like, in a sense, a perfect painting to encompass what the Conviction series is about, is because this is the locker. The subject is, this is the locker that they give you when you go to prison, you know, to put all your personal belongings in. So, okay, you're assigned to this bunk, this locker, and, you know, whatever commissary, whatever, you know, your photos, family photos, whatever you have goes in that locker, right? Wow. So your whole life is in this locker. So it's a snapshot of prison life.
Wow.
Just this painting, right? Yeah. So anyone that's been in that circumstance will recognize this, and it'll instantly resonate, and maybe even give them PTSD. You know what I mean? Because they're like, I get that.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
It's everything that they have a value put in one place in this distilled moment in time where they are trapped in a space that they have no control over their physical spaces.
Right.
Wow.
But this is turning it around, right? Flipping a negative into positive.
Yeah.
And so using the master lock, you know what I mean? It was the metaphor of the wording, right? But the lock unlocked says a lot.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Unlocking the master within, unlocking those gifts. You know what I mean? For me, the painting was not my own doing. You know what I mean? Learning these techniques was a gift, I felt like.
Wow.
You know? So I looked at it like that, where other artists may not. You know what I mean? But it was locking the master and the gifts he gave me and what he wanted me to do with them, right? So unlocking the master was, it was so deep with just very minimal subject matter, because typical prison art and paños is very busy, a lot of subject matter, right? This is completely different. Yeah. But, and it was so different than many of my paintings, because a lot of my other paintings are very busy. This is one of the more minimalistic.
I feel so bad for the people that are listening, because they can't see what you're, because we're put it out audio wise and video wise. It's so amazing. You guys got to check it out.
I'm sorry. Yeah, go to the video format.
Go to the video format
of the podcast to see it.
And yeah. Anyways, tell us more. Sorry, I interrupted.
And so that is what this series was all about, was connecting with viewers that one could relate to it. You know, in those circumstances, and like it was for them as much as like in an empowerment thing, like you know, find your master, unlock your master, you know, what is your gifts, you know. But at the same time, it was for the art world, where I'm showcasing the technical ability here. You know, it's not, you know, it's very technical on this piece. It almost looks like a photograph.
It does.
People see it and it's like, is that a photo? And like, no, that's a painting. So you see it and you instantly, okay, it solidifies it
tricks it messes with your brain looking at it, because it's simplistic, and then it leads down to such like delicacy in the lock that it's just, you know what I mean, like all the lines,
even like the rays emitting from it almost give you a clue that it is a painting. You know what I mean? But even like where the number's at, it's on number 7. You know what I mean? So but there's just a lot of subtleties that you know, and that's the beauty of painting. Like it could be very deep and very subtle at the same time. You know, and so this one was like really not just showcasing the technical ability, but how metaphor and like a very deep meaning can come in, you know, a very simple subject matter. And this is like, you know, again, the master lock is something that you get on commissary, so it's something like they can relate to. But in sense, this whole series was to, I felt like, and I still believe, it's gonna be that connection, that bridge from that world to this world, you know, and everything beyond it. And if you look at history, historically, like we're the most incarcerated nation in history than any societies throughout history.
Wow.
You know, so that's a huge, you know, time and place in history that I partook in.
Yeah.
And I felt very, called and blessed to contribute to that and vocalize that or articulate that through fine art.
Yeah, wow. That's awesome. I did want to ask one question, and I do apologize. I need to probably get out of here in the next 10, 15 minutes. But you're around age 31 and you're out. Did you get out around age 31?
Yeah. 30. Yeah, 31, 32.
Somewhere around there. Yeah. What is that feeling? What is that like? Just like, okay, you're done. You've fulfilled your term.
Well, getting out, I know, was it's a loaded very question. Surreal. Yeah. Very surreal. And one of the last paintings I did is Pond's Exit, and I did it in surrealism. And it's got this long hallway that comes to an end, and then you see an exit door there, and it's a sally port, like where you get out of, like an R&D where you get out. Mm-hmm. And it's like this dark hallway, but all the light's coming from that window and outside. So it's like you're coming out of the darkness into this world, mm-hmm. And the floor, I used the checkerboard because, it's very symbolic, and I've used it in some of my pieces, but it also, chess and making moves, and everything's a move and strategic as well. But I put a pawn in there because at time, in that situation, you feel like a pawn, you know, and a pawn can only move one square at a time. Mm-hmm. So in prison, like you could only one day at a time, Wow. So that painting, like, articulated me getting out and how surreal it was. And the floor was, I got real surreal with it in terms of painting style, and the floor looked like surreal and wavy, and getting out felt very surrealistic. So it was like, I didn't know. I mean, it was just, that's the best term I could use, is surreal. Mm-hmm. But I remember.
What was the first thing you did?
Okay, so when I got out, like felt like I was on a race to finish these paintings, and it was so weird because I remember feeling like only if I had a couple more weeks I could finish these pieces, and I'm like, what am I thinking? I've been waiting for this day forever. Let's get out of here.
A couple more weeks, actually.
Actually, I think I would stay in a couple more weeks. Let me go lose some good time or something. But no, I remember, getting out, and I was in Springfield, Missouri when I got out. I went from Pennsylvania to Colorado to Springfield, Missouri.
Dang, they moved you all over.
Yeah. Well, when I got shipped, I was way on the other side of the country, right? So when I did enough time over there and my points dropped, I tried to get closer to home.
Oh, right.
But at the same time, I dropped security levels, and I went to a camp. So I was able to get to a camp in Colorado. And I did several years there, and then ended Camp Fluffy. I was chilling in Camp Fluffy.
Okay.
And when I got there, it was very small. It was nice because it wasn't a big old institution with all, but they had the medium there where it was, they had those prisoners, and you could see, but you weren't inside that fence.
Okay.
So we were in that institution, and it was Camp Fluffy. So I was, they didn't have an easel or painting program there, but I had someone in the wood shop make one, and I helped him design it.
That's cool.
So we made one, and it stayed there, for future residents.
So you helped pass the gift
programming.
To
yeah, it was cool.
Whoa.
So, and then when I went to Springfield, Missouri, they had their art program there. I was able to get in really quick, and I let them know, that because they had programs where inmates could teach classes, mm-hmm. and they'd give you a certificate, so it counted as for the inmates taking it, their programming.
Wow.
So but at the same time, if you teach the class, you can get materials for the class and stuff, and I had to re-up my supplies every time I transferred. They wouldn't let you travel with that stuff.
Oh.
So any of my paint supplies, I had to start over every time, right? So, so I was like, oh, this is a way I can get some supplies and get started, So I designed a curriculum, and at that time, once I studied with him, I was like a sponge, right? So I was reading whatever formal education I can get, books and whatnot. So I designed a curriculum when I was in Springfield, Missouri, to teach art to the inmates there. And through that, I realized, man, I have a strong basis for a book. Like I pretty much wrote the book, and there was all this other, material that went along with it that I was like, man, this would be perfect for a book. And it would teach other people inside these things and be like what he was for me.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And so I that's one of the things I really need to work on editing and getting done, because I feel like that's a big part. Because this stuff is for them inside as much as it's to translate for the outside world, right? Yeah. So one thing I felt was the strongest was beyond inspiring and showing, because when my piece went to the museum shortly after getting out and stuff like that, I knew it was a big win for beyond me. It was a big win for prison art. It was a big win,
Was the Passion of Christo went to the museum?
To know that a piece that was created inside was recognized as such in a permanent collection, it was a huge win, I mean, for prison art in general. But that book, I felt like, was something that they can pick up and learn from and be not just inspired, but get formal education from.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So there was both those aspects of that. But when I started teaching art in prison, I came up with this curriculum, and I was away where I was able to get supplies and pass. And I started, once he left Latuna, even the guys that were in there working with him, they started asking me questions, because like I just picked it up really quick,
You're like the paint key holder.
I got passed down the keys.
Yeah, that's
man.
So, and I wanted to share
and
that.
And you're unlocking those doors, the master locks, man.
So, well, and it was a very humbling position to be in, but at the same time, I wanted to share that. I didn't I got all. No, I wanted to share it with other people, and I want them to learn these techniques.
If somebody wanted to like see a collection of all your work, like, do you have like a website?
That's what I'm working on now. Okay. So, I had a website. Getting out, I started. Because it was a pretty big collection that I used to, I used to send
how many
home.
Like pieces did you have?
Used to roll them up, send them home, and my mom just kept bringing them in and sharing them. She was the gallery for say then, and then when I but I started getting high resolution captures of, and I still haven't even got all of them, because at a certain point I got a lot of them done, but basically what I'm doing is right now is I really need to take inventory of where I'm at now and catalog all this stuff, right? Take inventory of every painting, even if I don't have it anymore, try to get documentation of it, good quality, images for say, like, I was getting professional photographers to get high resolution scans of these. And so as I started collecting them, I started building a website, and my first website was on a hosting site. It was Zenfolio, so it was for photographers mostly, but it was a way that you can put all your images on there and people can view them, and it was like a great portfolio. But at the same time, I was able to sell prints of those, and I wouldn't even have to, they would just cut me a check if anything was bought, I wouldn't have to do any of it. But it didn't feel like it was, I felt like I needed my own website, not on a hosting site. And that was always, I need to take it to that level, right? And just have my own .com.
So somebody could go and see your stuff.
Right.
And experience a little part of what we've been able to experience today, like your story.
Right. So I've slowly, I shut down that Zenfolio eventually, because, that fee every year just wasn't, I wanted to do something different, and I should have kept it going for at least that purpose. But so right now, I don't have a website, but if you Google Eric Christo Martinez, you can see images, and you can see some articles and different publications and stuff. And a lot of that stuff, as I look now, it's even gone further back where you have to dig it up. You know what I mean? Like, but back then, you could Google my name and just all this stuff popped up right away. Like now you have to dig a little bit deeper. But as far as images, there's a lot of images there. And especially with a lot of the other events that have taken place and stuff since, or things I've gotten involved with.
So hopefully in the future you will have a showing, a encapsulation of the Conviction series, and an event and a showing in a space where that can be experienced.
My goal and my vision originally was I want to do a traveling show with this thing. You know what I mean? And because I wanted it not just for the art world and the general public, but I wanted it for the people inside as much. So I had this vision of this traveling show that would show inside the prisons as well as outside.
Wow.
So when I first got out and that piece went to the museum and they did the front page article in the journal and it got syndicated nationally, the MDC, the jail here locally, they contacted the museum and asked if they'd put them in touch with me. And so they did. And I ended up having a meeting at the Metropolitan Detention Center. And this is while I was still on federal probation. I'm walking in the front door and it was a trip. Again, surreal. They call me for the meeting and I'm meeting with the warden and the captain and all these people that they contacted me and they're like, we got this art programming going on in our honor pods and we want to do this art show out in the community.
Yeah.
And we want you to get involved. Like, you're, successful artist. And I literally just got out. Like, so it was like, kind of a surreal thing that, and here I am walking in the front of the jail and walking in on my own accord. Yeah. You know what I mean?
Going to have a meeting with the guys there rather than,
And I'm, for one, wasn't used to talking to staff in general like that. Like, you keep a real, distance from that, as an inmate. And so, but here they are wanting me to get involved with their programming. And so I was like, well, how does this benefit them, the artist? Can they because they were wanting to sell the pieces too. And I was like, do they get a portion? And they were like, no, logistically, we can't do that. And I was there, but it goes towards resources for the program. And I'm like, all right, well, either way, it's good for them to have their stuff shown in the community. And it's, it was big. So we ended up doing it at the Hispanic Cultural Center. Wow. And our first, we had a show there at the Cultural Center, and that, it's a major museum per se. And so it was a great win for prison art and all of it, you know what I mean? So it was like the first, because I envisioned some of these things in prison, and it was the first dry run per se of what that would look like, and partnering with the jail in that way. So and it was a great show. Like I think even the county, they documented and did some kind of show, and I've never seen it to this day. I wonder where it is or how you see it.
Well, I think there's definitely more to come on everything you're going to be doing with all of this too. It's not, you know what I mean? Like, this is just a start.
That's where I'm like, okay, now I need to figure out. Now I'm talking with, other people. Like I said, I mentioned Antonio earlier, and he was helped found the museum, and so through these periods of time, I'm like, who's collecting prison art on that level? Like I see Cheech, right? Mm-hmm. And what he's done for Chicano art. He started just collecting all this stuff and realizing how important it was, but then founded a museum around it. And I'm like, that's what I need to do with prison art.
Yeah.
So that's a vision of what I feel like I need to do. I need to help found a museum for prison art, and this series and this traveling show is supposed to travel in and out of prisons and the art world and what have you.
That sounds killer.
So, I feel like an important part of that is also the story behind it.
Yeah, for sure.
And, how do you show that without, telling the story? So we've talked about projects and stuff and film and stuff like that. And So there's so many components to it that like, it's like, how do you even start with something like this? Right. But right now I'm just like, I need to take inventory, just like in prison, like, okay, where am I at? And what are the steps here? And connecting with all the right people to like, you know, cause this is a vision much bigger than myself.
Yeah, for sure. So are you on any sort of social media at the moment
I am,
where people could go
I
and
kind
follow
of,
you?
When I had the shop and studio gallery going, I was real heavy on social media and even just getting out, trying to make a living with art and becoming a tattoo artist and stuff like that. You know, it was like the era of like really promoting yourself on social media. So I was, you know, had a lot of success with that. But at a certain period later, like I kind of like pulled back and it was just so time consuming. And
we've talked about that a lot.
I had to disconnect in a lot of ways, and I'm on there, but I'm just not really that active as much, you know? So I want to find a way to balance it.
You need conversations with like the right people rather than with a lot of people, I think. You know what I mean? It's like your story is so strong, so real, so transformative that it's less about, it's more about like your time too. I think
time
it's like,
management at the end of the day. We only got so many hours left in this lifetime, you know, and I got to make the most of it. So that's where I'm at now is like, even just as a tattooer, I had to, you know, I'm sure I'll still tattoo, you know, in some capacity, but I think I had to step away from that. And everything kind of happened the way I felt it should have. Like, cause I didn't, you know, leave downtown like as a plan, you know, but now I'm on this new chapter and I still feel like I'm in the khaki period and I still got a lot of work to do. And I, you know, I'm sure I'll be doing work with prison art till I'm gone. Right. But I do feel like I need to transition out of that period at some point. And once those things are doing what they're supposed to do, I feel like I can really move on to the next chapter, and it's exciting. What will that be? You know, but
I think this is a
still
start
have a lot of work to do.
Like, I don't know if you've shared your story in a medium where people can hear it over the internet until now. So like, and maybe you have, but like, this is a amazing medium for people to hear
to have these conversations, this dialogue.
Like know? This is a 2-hour beautiful conversation.
That's why podcasts are great, right?
Yeah, man. I'm just I'm like, I feel like anyone who listens to this is so lucky. Like,
I know, it's super inspiring, man. What a great story.
Thank you. Yeah. And I, you know, I feel very honored, you know, that God chose me to do this, you know, but I feel like, you know, he's kind of, hey, it's time to get busy here. You've established yourself enough with making a living and tattooing and doing all these other things. Like, and I realized, cause I was pushing all this stuff even through that and doing all these things with it. And I would just, as it would come, but, I really had to find a way to balance it all and make a living at the same time. And so I realized, well, so many of these things I want to do are, you know, am I going to wait for that right person to like just discover it and say, oh, I know how to do that here, you know, and lay it all out for me? No, like I got to figure out how to, regardless at the end of the day, make sure it happens. So I became like, okay, no, I need to focus on my entrepreneurial skills.
I was just going to say, all that business time
and all that spent. Business and everything, I got to get real savvy with it to fund this thing. And make it happen regardless. Like, because I've, you know, even with the perspective of starting a museum, like normally people think of starting a successful business. You know what I mean? Many people don't think in terms of museum in historical context.
Like, I don't know how museums really make money.
And it's not about making money.
You
know, even if, because that was the whole thing. Like, I was like, in terms of, okay, how do I make this happen logistically? Because I always envisioned it like this big grand tour that would take a lot of planning and hit these things strategically. And it was like, no, that's not logistically, that doesn't make sense. And it finally dawned on me, oh, I need to create a home for them. And instead of all these pieces going out to different museums and being separated, they're stronger together.
Yeah.
And when you have that collection intact together, like I just finished seeing the Diego Rivera exhibit in San Francisco, and you see this whole retrospect of his work, and it's more powerful together. You know what I'm saying? So I was like, I need to create a home for this, so that way it doesn't have to be spread out all over. And even if it is, like, it has a place to come home to, but it can go, schedule wise and tour wise, like it can, because museums are on a very, their schedules are like years out. Like even if they like, I love this, I want to put it on the schedule, but I can't get it in till 2026. Where if it had a home and it started doing those dates and getting those dates, it could go do what it's supposed to do and then come back home. Yeah. And it have a place to.
So we need a permanent home in New Mexico.
A permanent home, and I feel like it needs to be in New Mexico. So I'm working on those things, and that's those talks I had with even Antonio, because he's established a museum, right? So
that's perfect.
Before that, it dawned on me like, oh, I need to establish a museum. Yeah. And before it was a wild idea, right? Even Adan had those ideas of a Chicano fine art museum. But it dawned on me like, okay, I need to found something, and this is more than just even like a business, right? You're talking nonprofit now, and all this whole other realm.
You're talking like creating something that sustains for years and years and years and
building a plan that's sustainable beyond me and my timeline of where I'm going to be here on Earth doing this work, right? So it's really trying to establish a plan that can do that, right? Yeah. And I feel like, like forget about what this, like that's why it was so hard to even sell a painting, at least the ones in this collection. Like I would even feel wrong, like getting monetary reward for them at times, because it's like this collection belongs to something else. Yeah. Like it belongs to history. Yeah. And it's really a strange perspective to take on, but I don't know how else to look at it.
Me neither.
Daniel, I can't wait to see the collection all in one piece, or like all together. I think that's gonna be awesome.
I think once it comes together in an exhibit, and so another friend of mine who's I was with him in La Tuna, and he's his story is really interesting too, but he was one of those ones, he shouldn't have been in there. You know what I mean? He was railroaded by the government. Like he wasn't guilty and shouldn't have been in there, but it inspired him to, he was even a college graduate, and very I think Stanford or what,
so like Ivy
League school. And he found himself in that situation, and he started studying law and getting learning a lot more, and he was helping people in there fight their case, or fight,
what do they call it, jailhouse lawyer.
He was a jailhouse lawyer, but he's not your typical jailhouse lawyer that you would think of. And he wasn't even taking commissary for his services. Like,
oh, he's like doing it for free for people.
He was doing it to help people, and because he knew that they needed the help because they were being taken advantage of. Wow. Or railroaded. And so his story is really powerful on the jailhouse lawyer side of his stories. Like, I feel like there's a great need for that as well, as far as like, because like you think of organizations like the, NAACP and all these people that help civil rights, right? Yeah. But where are all these organizations? Where are these people that are helping people that really need it in those situations? There isn't. And there is some stuff out there, there's organizations, but how do you even I mean, begin to scratch the surface of that. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So it's, so, you know, I feel like just telling these stories and, you know, like you said, like feeling the need to, not just write your own stories versus working for a big network, but, telling those stories that aren't being told, or, you know, having good representation of these people in those positions is important. Right. So, and, you know, I've realized there's a lot of talent that comes out of there, because a lot of these people they're doing the same thing. They're taking inventory and what am I gonna, you know, so many of them coming out and done successful things and done amazing things.
Mm-hmm.
And whether they associated their past with it or not, or the motivation of where that came from, I feel like a good, safe place to be able to do that and inspire the others in there, like say Jimmy has for me, is huge, right? Because when I read his book, it empowered me. Like, here's this guy telling stories with a community I'm familiar with, and he's from that, but and was illiterate, but now here he is, a world-renowned writer. You know what I mean? And here I am reading his book, you know, in prison. And it was inspiring.
And then you met him.
And then I met him, and then we've gone on to do work and stuff.
Yeah, that's crazy, man.
But, you know, so I really feel like that, or Hendrik, or, you know, Maestro, can be a very empowering, like, maybe that would be cool if there was no name attached to any of it. It's just that guiding spirit of knowledge and Maestro, you know?
Yeah.
That, but, you know, so yeah, there's a lot of work to do.
Yeah.
A lot of work to do.
I'm excited.
I do apologize. I need to get going. But, Eric, dude, thank you for coming on. What an incredible story. And I'm glad that we made this happen. Yeah.
Yeah.
Do you have anything else you wanted to throw out there?
No, I love you.
Yeah.
I'm so grateful for you.
Man. Yeah. You know, we've had a lot of deep conversations, and, you know, a lot of, beyond, like, you know, family, this, that, or whatever, like on these levels of talking, you know, in terms of art and culture and everything else. Like, it's, you know, so, you know, I'm excited on what's going on in your world. I'm excited on the things that I'm working on. Yeah. And I'm just like, you know, okay, how do we, because time is limited, right? Yeah. How do we, and that's my biggest problem, is I spread myself thin. I got all these things going on, but I need to be able to focus on certain individual projects. Yeah. And so now I'm working on, like, okay, organizationally, and, you know, and entity wise, and just starting from the ground up of building a foundation that way. Just like
we just got to have those meetings. Yeah.
I'm starting to found, you know, not just Eric Christo Art that I started when I first got out, but those particular projects that, are departure points for a lot of these things, you know? So,
well, I'm here to help. However, you know,
you know, I look forward to, you know, projects, and, you know, we're going to just have to link up more and just really see what's going on in each other's world, and see how we can, you know, continue to work on these things.
Well, we'll post even though you may not be super active, but we'll post your social medias down below the description and all that. And
hopefully, you know, down the road I'll have another website up.
And we'll have you on again. We'll chop it up. I mean, this podcast is living and breathing and moving, and it's for stories like yours. It's for building this medium for us to communicate to the world. Hey, there's people out here, you know. Yeah. Hey, we got the goods, you know. Yeah. So yeah.
Well, it's good stuff. Good stuff.
Cool.
So.
All right, brother.
Well, thank you for having me.
Yeah, thank you again.
Yeah.
Thank you for listening, everybody. And yeah, cool.
Have a good day.